One of the things that we hear in our kind of community discussion is the types of units that are included, because people think that a lot of new units that come on board are going to be studios, 1 to 2 bedrooms, and if I'm a family, I mean, I have 2 kids. At some point, right now, they're kind of squeezed into 2 bedrooms, but at some point, they're going to want to have their own bedrooms. Like, how can I stay in the community if that supply is not as readily available? Do you have any thoughts on how this kind of whole paradigm shifts that?
This is something that we think about a lot at MAPC. One of the things that our agency does is looks at sort of how our household's changing over time. We do household projections as part of our transportation planning work.
Yeah.
And so we actually are seeing, probably not surprising, that the number of households growing is smaller households. But the issue that we're running into in our region that ties to the housing issues that we've been talking about tonight is that because housing is so unaffordable, there's not a life cycle shift that is happening. So we have a lot of larger household or housing units, homes, 3-bedroom homes that exist, but folks are getting older. They can't really downsize because they can't afford or find that right downsizing option.
Right.
And so
Right.
that, I think, is making this crunch feel a little bit more apparent because, younger families can't find those 3-bedroom homes because the folks who have them that maybe needed them 30 years ago can't find that smaller unit that's affordable. And
Right.
so it's kind of like it's a complex question because the answer is not necessarily, well, we need all of these new units to be 2 or 3 bedrooms, because that's going to work against this overall population growth trend that we're seeing, where we're having more single person households, we're having more, maybe 2-person households, and they don't need that much space either. And so it's really about continuing to build a lot of different unit types with different sizes, and then also thinking about how can we help folks who are ready to sort of move through different life stages and move through the different houses that you need at different life stages. How are we facilitating that? And so we see this a lot, especially in our suburban communities that we work in the MAPC region, where a lot of the housing stock are single family homes. We, are talking to people out in the community, and it's maybe a 70-year-old widow who is like, I really don't want to take care of this 3-bedroom house anymore. I would love to not have to try to get my son to come over and mow my yard, but I also can't afford anything to downsize in my community because my community may not have
Yeah.
apartments or may not allow apartments because the zoning is too restrictive. Maybe there is some senior affordable housing, but it's not enough to accommodate all of the seniors that need it in their community. And so it's a little bit more complex than dictating on a
Mm.
development by development basis. And zoning certainly is not the best tool to dictate that unit count and unit mix, unless you are thinking about like an inclusionary policy where you can make some of those restrictions. But across the board, it's not too good to get too specific in the spirit of what we've been talking about tonight, of being flexible and allowing developments to sort of respond to what communities need in the market is kind of driving as far as a demand perspective.
That's really helpful to hear. Enrique, you have
I
your hand.
I think that Andrea said that perfectly. I literally see that happen in my inbox in my community meetings a lot, where in Hyde Park, another neighborhood that I represent, you have the Pride, which is a
Right.
senior living a project that had lines out the door with folks, literally out the door, with folks trying to apply to live there. You have another one at 1201 River Street. Obviously, we just mentioned the B'nai B'rith building that is going to
That's
be
right.
more senior
Mhm.
housing in Rosendale. So what you do see is in my district of District 5, Rossi, Hyde Park, Mattapan, it is the more quote unquote suburban part of the city. And I think Andrea hit the nail on the head where you see an older couple that may want to had the kids, no more kids, they want to downsize. And then that house opens up to a younger family per se. Let's say that's a situation. But what I also see, and it's something that I've been speaking with the Boston Housing Authority, is those units are also being clogged up by families that have had their child move out, but they're still living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom
Mm,
unit.
mm.
And there's no segue for them to transition to a smaller unit. And then in that situation is even deeper because we're talking about families that are in shelters who could then be put into a Boston Housing Authority unit, and then that family's in the Boston Housing Authority unit to a more different unit. So it's all a cycle. It's a domino effect that I think
Councilor Pepen did a great job illustrating that chain of moves effect where, creating senior housing frees up single family homes for people to move in. And there's a lot of really great academic literature to seeing that for every new unit being created, it's multiple chains of moves that get filtered through the housing inventory that really allows people to get the housing that they need. One other effect that I wanted to mention, which, again, it's kind of a second order effect, but when you create studios and you create one bedrooms for people who are, say, young professionals looking to move to the city, that actually does have an impact on making the larger 3-4 family bedrooms more affordable and accessible, because if those units did not exist, you can imagine that 3 or 4 working professionals could come together and rent one of those. And certainly this is happens all the time in San Francisco, where the housing stock hasn't changed that much over the last few decades. And you can imagine that they would very easily be able to outcompete on a market for those units versus a family where, they're raising multiple kids and looking to access those units. And so indirectly, when you're creating units to serve the people who are better suited for studios and one bedrooms, you're actually also creating inventory and availability for the families that need those 3 bedrooms and more available.